Welcome to the 25th episode of the Animal Riot Podcast, brought to you by Animal Riot Press, a literary press for books that matter. It's your producer, Katie, here, and this episode has been edited to reflect our new name. If you're new to the Animal Riot community, welcome, and you can find out more about us at animalriotpress.com. Now on to the episode with your host, Brian Birnbaum, and today's guest, Kwame Opoku-Duku.
Here today with Kwame Opoku-Duku, a poet and prose writer whose collection Unbnd Verses is out with Glass Poetry Press, and who's also just kicked off a new reading series called Dear Ocean, sponsored by Human Impacts, which invites readers to read works surrounding issues of climate change. And I've made my own little submission, as we just discussed. But yeah, let's start off with Unbnd Verses. When it came out, how, like, your process, everything, A to Z.
Well, it's interesting because I think, and I'm not sure how it's like worked with you in your writing process. Like, I know you have a book coming out, but for me, I didn't necessarily realize that it was going to be a book until maybe like a little bit more than half of it was done. And
that's honestly, I feel like that's one of the best ways to go about it. Because you're not saying this is the thing I need to do, and then like you find yourself just trying to finish something, and it doesn't come completely from an organic, like, passionate place. All that shit can happen. But anyway,
yeah, I'd actually been writing. I was in a poetry workshop, and I had been writing these series of poems called Comportment, and it was like comportment number 1 through like 8. Every single poem was a comportment poem. And some of those,
sorry for illiterate dunces like me, when you say comportment, is that a poetry term?
Well,
or?
I think I just kind of like came across the term a lot because of like different like areas of like African American studies and like culture and like basically like just the way you carry yourself.
Yeah, I was literally so it's not something esoteric to poetry. Lexicon. It's just sort of like the way you're literally talking about how people carry themselves.
Yeah, okay. Just the way that I guess specifically sort of like black bodies move through time and space with these sort of like external pressures around them. And toward the end of it, I just like wanted to write a poem that wasn't a comportment poem. And so I started thinking about the Bible actually, and certain aspects of the Bible that I was not like necessarily looking to reproduce, but I think I was looking for a new voice, like looking for a new way to I guess maybe talk about the same things. And so they were called the Old Head Verses, and sort of like there were 2 of them, and they sort of ended up becoming like the spine of the chapbook.
Did they close it out, or are the poems not kind of chronological according to how you?
Well, so let's see. Like, so I like did them kind of. Their verses in the book. There are, I think, 53 verses in total, and the first ones I wrote were 45 through 53. And then the second one I wrote was 1 through 20. And so like I don't know how it ended up working out. Then I wrote like 21 through 25, and I just wrote them in weird orders, and that kind of worked. And I think a lot of them are sort of the context through which they're written a lot of the times like sort of coincided with African Americans being shot by the police. And so
were they specifically shooting incidents, or were they, or like the whole I can't breathe thing? Is it like?
Well, I think one was Alton Sterling, and gosh, I can't even remember. They're just like there's so many, but there was an incident there's almost like an anonymous quality at some point. Yeah,
there
in
are so
Baton
many.
Rouge as well, and it's just like through discussions that I was having with friends and things that I was meditating on. And for me, writing poetry is like, it's a lot about just obsessions. Like I'm just writing notes down constantly, thinking just about different rhythms. And then at some point, you just boil it all down. And at some point there's a poem.
Yeah. Going back to just the idea of comportment, the comportment of black bodies, I think that's an incredibly fraught subject. Just because, another one of the double standards in America is that like there's almost like, there's not the same kind of double take when it comes to like, oh, how is a white person acting? How is an Asian person acting? You know,
Right.
it's like Black America has so many shades of like person. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think there's expectations not just from without, but within the Black community of like, oh, if you act this way, then you're this kind of Black person or something like that. You know?
Well, yeah, that, but I think even just like more than that, there's been an obsession like with this country, with the Black body, from just the time that, you know, they first saw Black people.
Yeah, because they were, I mean, just the way that, you know, Black people have entered this country.
Right.
know?
And then so like control of Black bodies and how they move through time and space has been a big thing with the country as well. So, and so when you have these issues where Black people are being shot by the police, you know, in their cars or like in situations where they're not doing anything that, you know, is like deserving of being shot, but it's the sense of fear, and it's like this like fantastic quality of the Black body and the white mind that is like an external pressure. And so yeah, it's true, like white people don't necessarily have to, I mean, I think that conscientious white people will think about the way their bodies move through time and space in like relation to like what's around them, but they don't like necessarily have to.
Exactly.
And
there's no immediate pressure to say, well, oh, you know, I mean, shit. I'm thinking. Have you heard Daytona? Little Pusha T's latest.
Yeah.
I fucking loved it. Kanye has this line about like driving black, and then he says like, "Well, MAGA hats let me slide through," you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I don't. You know, being black is a very unique way. You know, that no other race or culture in this country, I feel like, has to think about that, except for, you know, Muslim culture definitely has its own issues today, but even it's not quite the same history. And so you're talking about, in terms of comportment, it seems like there is a focus on the safety and like, you know, just the not necessarily within black culture, but like, you know, just moving through space as a black person. It sounds like when you're focusing on the shootings and like that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, the first poem in the collection, there's a line, "Why do niggas in New York wear black? Maybe because we want to hide, to lose our bodies and keep them, to close our eyes and forget it all." And I like, that's just, I think at some point you walk down the street, you know, there's some microaggression toward you. There's something that's happening. You're seeing something on the news. And at some point, like, you just wish you could become invisible.
Yeah.
Or you wish that, you know, there could just be some release of the idea that you are being marked because of your skin, and all the associations that come with that marking.
Yeah, and it's impossible to turn off.
It's you can never turn it
Yeah.
off. There's this story in Friday Black, the collection, which I'm not sure if you've read, but I can't remember the name. But the character, he's a black character, and he starts by talking about how he can like literally tone down his blackness to adjust to different situations. So like being on a phone call, he turns the blackness down to,
and
like,
that's what I was talking about. Yeah, it's like that way of carrying yourself, because there's just like so much judgment, I feel like, you know, and I wouldn't know. Yeah. But just, you know, as someone who's tried to imagine, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that you can allow yourself to feel weighted down by expectations, whether, you know, sort of like expectations to act black or expectations to subvert that, or to like quote unquote like rise above.
Yep.
And so yeah, like I think that every black person is like maybe not grappling with their blackness, but trying to understand it. And I don't know, like for me it's not an issue. Like I live in like a really cool place, you know, like I live in a black neighborhood in New York City.
Right down the street from us. Everyone,
yeah, so
come see us on 147.
Yeah, so it's not like, I mean, I've like been in white neighborhoods before and just been walking around and just, you know, felt completely like all eyes on me.
Yeah.
And it's not
No
like
pun
that here.
intended.
Yeah. But, you know, I think with a lot of Black poets, you're going to be like reading about the way that our bodies move through time and space. You're going to be reading about grief and loss. And yeah, that's just how it is. Like there are certain people like Ross Gay, like a lot of writers are, Hanif Abdurraqib, are trying to write about things that bring them joy, and maybe exclusively. And I don't know if I'm there yet, but I think that's something that I'm trying to work toward as well.
Yeah, you know what? And I really admire that, because that's such a hard, that's a juggling act. You don't want people saying like, oh, what are you denying, like the experience we're going through, like, and now you're just going to focus on this shit. But like at some point also, it's like, I understand the desire to want to feel the same things that other people in this country are feeling, or like, to just have this unadulterated feel, like, pursuing this joy. It's not like I'm sweeping this under the rug, but like I'm setting this down just for a moment,
Yeah.
And I think that's tough. I think that's really tough.
Well, I think that in sort of maybe like the Black American canon, aside from a few writers, and it's starting to change now, I think that it was like very masculine in a way. So I think that we were sort of raised with people like Richard Wright and Ralph Ellison, who are great writers, but it's always this sort of like me against the world character.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
a lot of like, I think that's especially a lot of like what white people feel in this country, is that like, that's like, sometimes I feel like it's even like drama porn, where it's like white people in this country want to read about that from a Black writer or something like that,
Yeah.
And subverting that even is like, that's rife in itself.
Right. And well, so what I was going to say is that, but the Black female authors have always been the one to focus on the community.
Yeah.
And I think shifting that gaze is something that's been really useful to me. I mean, of course, like we all have our obsessions. We all have the things that we're going to write about and our experiences.
And you can't escape them. Right. Yeah.
But I think that the sense of writing about community and building community, and maybe not necessarily making it always about my ego or experience, but more about the greater experience. I think that is a way to find joy more than just sort of the me against the world character. Because I don't know, these guys don't win. And I think that's it's a tragedy that character will never win in literature.
Yeah. Because winning would involve rewriting history, essentially.
Yeah, and
in a way,
overcoming a structure that is immense and tied into the history of an entire like place, entire country, entire culture.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Wow. Heavy already. Heavy
right
shit
out,
already.
Right out the gate. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you read a couple of those poems and some new stuff at Angry Reading Series. I saw you read there. Must have been a few months ago now.
Yeah.
But we've had the lovely ladies from Angry Reading Series on here a couple times. So they're great. Yeah. So let's talk about where you come from and how you got here. You're from Massachusetts.
Yeah. So since this is the biography part, we're going to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
So my dad is Ghanaian. He moved to the States. My mom is from Louisiana. So they met in Baton Rouge and they got married, and I was born down there. And then I moved to Massachusetts when I was like maybe 4 or 5, and then stayed there pretty much until moving to San Francisco. And then I was there for 6 years before moving to New York. And now I've been in New York for 6 years.
And you went to San Francisco. Was that for college, after college?
No, I went there. I went there for a lot of reasons. I had this like it was a very abstract like dream of getting out of Massachusetts, like in this dead industrial place. And
we've talked about that a lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
Especially for artists, it's like who feel disconnected.
Right.
If you're not anywhere but these like select handful of cities where it feels like it's the epicenter of everything that's going on,
Yeah. And I was so immature. Like I thought if I just moved to California, I would become like a famous artist and just dude. And then so I went out there with a friend, like we went out there to play music. and I was doing like graffiti and stuff. I was just like, I was such a cliche. It was,
Hey, you know, if Instagram was alive back then maybe you would have been famous.
I don't know.
Maybe famous for the wrong reasons. I don't know. But yeah, so we spent a little bit of time before the podcast, and we've had this discussion before, but just talking about the things you went through out there, and you were in a band, and I don't know. Is it fair to call it a drug band? That's kind of something you associated with it, but at the same time, it was like it was modeled after bands that you said you admire. You know, there was an ethos or something going on.
Yeah, well, I think, and to like be, I guess, sort of completely forthcoming, like actually, like I was doing drugs when I was in Massachusetts, and I was.
Were you trying to escape that at all, or
no,
or
like
go towards
I thought I was just trying to escape like the sense of like hopelessness I had. Like I was like living with a woman who's like we just like we weren't like right together. It was a weird situation. Like she was like married, and like that didn't work out. So
you were living? Did you say you were living with her?
Yeah,
wow.
like it was just like a whole situation. I was so young, and I was such an idiot, and like at this time I was like really just sort of like up to no good. Like that was just like so, but also while kind of being this like punk that was up to no good, like I still thought like that in my heart, like I was an artist, and I was like writing, and it was all kind of like
definitely not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and,
or else I'd be fucked because I spent a lot of my life up to no good. So
yeah, well, I think that my problem back then was that I thought that doing drugs would bring me closer to that like sense of being like a true artist because of the
whole
suffering
project.
Yeah. And so that's like a whole like, that's like I should have just like got a therapist really like but yeah, so I just like went down a different route, and like me and my friends, we thought we were like renegades. Yeah.
Yeah, it was part of your identity.
But we were jokers, really. Like we.
And
were,
this is still back in Massachusetts.
This is Massachusetts,
and
like ending up in like we like moved to California within like a few months of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think if you didn't have art and like some greater purpose or whatever you want to call it, do you think you'd still be like kind of drilling deeper into that drug hole? What do you think kept you from kind of going down it,
Wow, I don't know. That's a really good question. Sometimes like I just think it might be luck, like, and I think that maybe somewhere in my mind, like I always had this idea that I could just like turn it all around, like just decide to like do this or decide to do that. And I started like being involved with the community out there a little bit more in terms of like the poetry community, and also, I completely like I just like started dressing differently. Like I started like dressing up. It was weird. Like I just decided to like become a different person, and I don't like even dress like that anymore. Like that was like the sellout version of me. But
so when you say decided to become a different person, where are you at this point? Like both literally and kind of like spiritually. Like
what does
coincide with?
I have a really good friend, but like we were roommates out there, and he like had some like really hard times. So I think kind of like being a witness to that it like changed me. Like it changed the way that like I saw myself and like my responsibility to myself, and like kind of seeing like really like I knew people who died growing up from like certain things or like whatever, like, but I think like watching someone who's like dying slowly can sort of like that can like really change you. And that's what they don't tell you about drugs. Is it like in DARE class when you're in 7th grade, they're like, yeah, you take drugs, you'll die. You just kind of imagine yourself just like dying, but like it's not like that. It's kind of like a time clock where you wait to have a health problem or overdose or something like it's a lot different than they teach you. I mean, yeah, it's like you pay a price. Like no one takes that ride for free. So,
yep.
So yeah, luckily. I don't be doing that shit no more. And yeah, like I mean it. like drugs hit hard in Massachusetts, like really, really, really hard.
Yeah, it's
like,
one of the, especially like Western Massachusetts, the rural areas, stuff like that,
Yeah, and like the sort of like Worcester area where I grew up, like I remember hearing for the first time like of like these kids robbing CVS's and stuff like that, and like Cape Cod and
getting Oxycontin and shit, or just
exactly.
like,
It was OCs, it was crack, like it was like I'm not to say like I was like I never did crack, but like there were just like all these things happening, and you're just like watching everybody around you, and like it's like family, friends, like neighbors, like everyone is just like a zombie, and so it was like I didn't necessarily think about it like that while I was sort of going through it, because I think that there's a way that it's almost normalized to you just because it's the sort of like culture that's around you. But now like I sort of look back on it and like I think about just like it was actually just like a really sad time, and there was like a lot of pain.
And you were just, in historical terms, you probably just seen the beginning of it.
In the beginning of what?
Like when you were in Massachusetts, I mean, I can only imagine things are worse at this point.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I was, like I didn't necessarily see, well, you know what it was when I started like idealizing California as like this thing that was like going to save me. So I think that was like one thing. But then like we get to California and just like of course like start looking for trouble. And then it was it's like we're free and we can do whatever we want, and then the next thing you know, like you're just like really testing your limits, and and there wasn't much probably that I wouldn't have like done or tried back then.
Was there a
TBH?
Was there like, so to speak, come to Jesus moment, or was it gradual?
Like I said, I think part of it was just seeing the way it was like affecting the people around me.
Yeah.
That was actually, I would say, like really the big part of it.
What about yourself? How was it affecting you?
Well, it was like during all this, like I was still like working, and like I would like,
what were you doing?
Bartending.
Yeah.
And which like probably wasn't like the best job.
Yeah. It definitely enables some of those behaviors.
Yeah, because you like always have cash, and like
yeah,
and you're up late, so
hanging around people that are probably doing the same shit. And,
yeah. So it was. But I guess like I don't know. Like I actually remember walking down the street because it wasn't like, I mean, like of course I had my sort of like the friends that I was out there like living crazy with, but I also had friends who didn't know what I was up to at all. Like I had girlfriends who like didn't know what I was up to at all. So in a sense I was like living two lives, and there are people who like thought of me, I'm sure, as just like a perfectly nice guy who was like well read and well spoken, and just an okay guy. And I remember I was walking down the street with one of my good friends at the time who now lives in New York, and I was like, if I could do it all over again, I think like I would go to Columbia and just go for creative writing, and just like try to do it right. And like maybe a year later, like I just was like, well, fuck it, I'll just apply, and I ended up getting in. And so that was like a truly life-changing moment. Like I cried, it was a big deal for me, because
felt like an exit ticket kind of.
Yeah, completely. Like, I mean, like I was like happy at this point, but like still kind of like unfulfilled, I think, as like a person.
Yeah. And
so, like I wouldn't have thought like in a million years that I would be like moving to New York to go to Columbia. So it was like really surprising. I didn't apply to any other schools, and I ended up just like having a really good time there. And like things like kind of worked out a little bit.
Well, I guess if our listeners weren't completely buying into your talent yet, then one for one. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, kind of just stepping back, I can relate to an incredible amount of what you just said. Just because I didn't apply to one, I applied to 7, and I only got into one. But but the same thing. I mean, when I was a teenager, I don't know. I just, not to get into it too much, I guess, a lot of trouble, very troubled spirit, all that stuff. And I went out to Seattle, and it actually was a big deal. It helped a lot. It, you know, kind of just having to be responsible for myself, you know, because I went right after college. But at the same time, by the end of my tenure in Seattle, I kind of saw the same thing happening. Like I had kind of run away from college, just being like, a lot of this stuff I'm doing is just not, I'm the same person, you know? And then I went out there, and though I grew up a lot, I also, after a certain amount of time without any like prospects that seemed to be concretely coming from my writing, you know, I had written a couple novels and like, you know, I'd started submitting, you know, blah, blah, blah. But finally my parents came to visit. My mom was like, you should apply for an MFA. I was like, I did the typical, fuck you, mom. What do you know? You know, not, you know, but
wow, that's pretty harsh.
no, that's not exactly what, but you know, like that was my, you know, I was still a kid.
Yeah.
I was still the kid who was like, oh, you know, you don't know what's best for me or whatever. And then like a month later, I was like, yeah, she's right. And then I started applying, and then, you know, I moved back here, and, I mean, like, you know, I can't say that I've like ever escaped myself, you know, that's definitely not true, but I don't know, call it luck, call it that, you know, whatever. You went to San Francisco expecting a certain thing, and even though it wasn't the direct effect, you still, who knows if you would have been, you'd be sitting here if you never went, you know. And it's the same thing for when I went to Seattle. It's like I had to learn something, I guess. I'm not sure quite what it is, but
yeah, well, I think growing up is actually like a big part of it. And, you know, like as men, we're socialized like so poorly, like from a young age, and we're sort of taught like we value like all the wrong things. Like we want to be like cowboys and like you know, like heroes and stuff like that. And I think at some point, like, what is it, like our cerebral cortex like forms at like a later age than it does for women. Like, so when that finally happens, like however many years later, like we just sort of like start to get things a little bit better. And I think, yeah, like at some point, like I was just like, oh shit, like I think I've grown up a little bit. Like I think I've matured. And yeah, like values started changing, and I started like thinking about the future. Like I never thought that I would I would never live past 25. Like, that's crazy. And then I would never live past 30. Yeah. But like, now I'm like, wow, like I actually like now like kind of like need to sort of figure out the rest of my life, like how, you know, like we're going to like sort of incorporate this like literary community into like our livelihoods and things like that. Yeah.
Do you ever still hear the call to like some of that old stuff, like your old ways?
No, never.
Yeah,
you're because like I wouldn't even
sufficiently disconnected from that.
No, I'm like now like the things that I value in life are like eating, like maybe, and like sometimes like I sometimes like I ask my friends this stuff, like, do you like ever feel like you sort of like let your like need for, or like this like addiction thing that like we have, like, you know, like manifest itself like with food or like working out or something like that? And I think that like it does, because you kind of like have to, like, you just like have to value different things. Like it's not like the drugs that you value, but it's that like, it's that feeling that you get from drugs, like whether it's like the escape or whether it is like confidence or something like that. And so like, yeah, you don't need the drug, but like maybe like somewhere like in your psyche, like you need that like sense of like doing something that will like increase your confidence, or
that you're going somewhere.
Like
the drug makes you feel like you're going somewhere. Because like so, like for example, if like you pick up your instrument and you're kind of like, fuck, and then you take drugs and you're like, oh yeah, like you said, I have confidence now, I have a direction, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you can get that feeling from other stuff. Maybe it's not as efficient as drugs, but yeah, I know what you mean. It's like the compulsion needs to go somewhere. And, you know, call it a compulsion, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like that thing, it like does need to go somewhere. And writing does a lot of it, but yeah, I mean, food, same thing. I've same experience.
I mean,
you know?
with like some of my friends, it's eating healthy. Some of my friends, it's traveling.
Yeah.
You know, so, but it like becomes this like, you know, this obsession in your life. And yeah, I really enjoy seeing the ways that like people are dealing with that, because you have to like just change, because
Yeah.
and for like people who like maybe were like drinkers and don't drink anymore, like being a bartender, like people will come in and drink for like 5 or 6 hours like every single day.
Yeah.
And I would like sometimes think like, gosh, like you could be writing a novel, like you could be, I mean, like whatever, like not to judge like people,
Yeah, of course not. Right.
you know,
right.
are like living their lives. But if like the people who are drinking 5 hours a day for 5 hours or for 5 days a week decide that they're not going to drink anymore, then they're just going to have a lot of time on their hands. So they're going to have to figure out some other way of like getting by and like making themselves feel like happy and fulfilled. So yeah, I mean, I think that's just a part of like growing into like another person, or like just growing into another way of living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. And yeah, but I guess before we move on, it's a good little launching pad, because do you know Monica Lewis?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. she's coming next week, I believe.
Oh, she's amazing.
Yeah, we're doing a whole we're gonna do a whole episode on substance use and mental health and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think it's like really brave for people to talk about that. Like I think for a lot of people, like, or for me, there are still a lot of things that like I'm processing. Like I had like actually like a situation the other day where I like kind of thought that like someone close to me like might be back on drugs, and it was like it was like a big, it like really kind of like fucked with me. So I was like, geez, you know, like there's I'm still like processing a lot. Like I think that like I might even have like in a sense like PTSD like about a lot of the stuff that like happens. So you know, like I think like you sort of like deal and process with these things like as you can, and then to like be able to use those experiences to like help others is like a really like cool thing to do.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head, because that's kind of you know, and I have no problem with being completely open and honest, but we were talking before we got on today about how it affects other people. Yeah. And that's already cropped up a little bit in my life, and I've had conversations with Katie about like how I should approach this podcast coming up with Monica, and just like if it were up to me, I would say everything that's on my mind.
Yeah.
And you know what? I probably to a large extent will, but you know, thinking about how it affects other people, it just sucks, because you know, I'm trying talk about a double standard. I'm trying to help build a world in which this stuff isn't taboo to talk about, because it's kind of counterintuitive when you want to figure out these problems but not talk about them and say it's just bad to be like that, and that's the end of the story. Go figure it out by yourself.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. Before we do move on, is there anything else you want to say about to that effect of like, you know, you just talked about your friend who you thought might have gotten back on drugs, or you know, what else, how else does it affect you in the sense of like what can you think about and not think about and say and not say, you know, that whole thing.
Well, I mean, I think maybe like if there is like a sense of resistance to like the autobiography, I think it's that a lot of people, I think as a writer of color, one thing that you're always fighting against is like the 100% like completely autobiographical read. Yeah. And so like I was watching an interview with Ocean Vuong on, I think it was like Seth Meyers or something, and he wrote this, you know, amazing book. I'm not sure if you read it, but it's called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous.
No, I've never read it.
And it just came out.
Are nodding their head because
it's a beautiful book, and it sort of is about a child of displacement, and a lot of it like deals with the Vietnamese War and the migration that came about to the United States because of that. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, these experiences like moving through the world as Vietnamese people in Hartford, Connecticut, and like not being able to speak the language, and like his experiences like being like his with a queer body in these spaces. And so there's like so much beautiful stuff in the book, and Seth Meyers is like, literally, so how much of the book is autobiographical? And I think like in that way that like white writers like don't necessarily have to like deal with that, because I think that they're given the benefit of the doubt that like they're capable of creating a story that
of
isn't
separating
just like
truth from fiction.
Where I think with women and writers of color, like there's always the sense that like it like is just like memoir. And so I think.
Do you think it's also exaggerated when it comes to certain subjects? You know.
Well,
because I'm kind of thinking of James Baldwin right now, and I'm also thinking about how people would have reacted today if Giovanni's Room came out and you're like, you didn't write that from a black character's perspective, but also just more in the sense of like what you were just saying, you know, it's like, do you think people would have questioned that based on the subject matter? It's like if it's negative subject matter or something like that, you know?
Right. I see what you mean. Yeah. Like he did, like, I believe say that he wrote it from a white character's point of view, specifically so that he could separate the issue of queerness from the issue of blackness. And
it's almost like he had to prioritize, you know?
Interesting. Yeah. And that was like, you know, that was a decision that he made, you know, it worked out the way that it did. Like Baldwin is, you know, one of the best, but yeah, like, I think that like there has to be like a certain, like, there has to be like a little bit of yourself that you like protect, because like there might be like certain things that come up in stories that are like actually like based on like my autobiography, and there might be things that are like actual just complete fiction. There might be characters that are like, you know, like 5 or 6 different people just like all in one characters. Composites, you know, and like so I would rather not like invite the sort of like read where people are
more concerned with what's true than what the
so
message
like
is.
If I am ever to like write about drugs or like write about certain situations, like I would, you know, like I feel like I would, like if I'm writing fiction, like I want to like be able to have that space to turn truth into art without like feeling like I'm actually like exposing anyone or like just, I don't know. I always think about what certain people might think of when they read my work. And these days, like when I was like younger, actually like a lot of the stories that I've published over the last couple of years, like I like actually never thought that they would be published. Like there were stories from workshop, and like you write them just because, you know, you like have to like turn in a story. Like you're not like, oh, I'm going to like send this to like Bomb or like the Kenyan Review after.
You know what? I actually don't think a lot of people think like that, and I think that's, you know, why you've probably seen a measure of success.
Yeah. Well, there's like one story.
You don't have those extraneous motivations, you know, which is funny. It's ironic because, though, you know, kind of the point is to fucking get published, right? But at the same time, it's like, if you're writing to get published, I mean, it's palpable, you know?
Yeah.
If you're writing to finish something and feel fulfilled and to fulfill the hypothetical reader, I think then you're onto something, you know?
Yeah. There's this like song that we would sing in the Baptist church. Like the lyrics were, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added onto you. Hallelujah. And so, like, I always kind of like think about that when I start thinking about like an end game in terms of like where I'm going to publish something, or like, you know, what I want the story or the poem or like something like that to accomplish. Because there's really, like, for me, the whole reason that I'm doing this is because like I just like want to write, and I want like a space where I can like just work through these obsessions and like things in my head. So yeah, I forgot where I was going with that actually.
No, I mean that's a beautiful feeling, because you're onto something that's like, it's self-sustaining. It's not like, you know, oh, now I'm done. I've done the thing I wanted to do. I got it published. What's next? It's like, oh, there's that question doesn't exist. You know what the answer to that question is.
Yeah.
You're writing whatever the next thing that you're trying to write is. You know, you're working through your existential crises, you know, so to speak.
Right. And I think like being an emerging writer, there's always a sense too of like a lot of the anxiety comes from like when you're unpublished, there's anxiety to publish, and then you publish in like, you know, sort of like a neat like little like independent journal, and then you want to like publish like in a place
Like
that
Sweeney's.
is whatever, yeah. And so like, yeah, maybe you publish in McSweeney's, and so like maybe at that point you're like, okay, no, I've been validated to like a degree where I don't feel any pressure to like achieve anything else, and like I can just like focus on the writing. And I think that is like, I think before you get to that point, you always like have to like remember that you're writing just because you're a writer and you're an artist and you're trying to create, and like all these things, you know, like if you're doing the work, like you'll be fine. Like it'll get published, you know, like you'll get the book deal, you'll get the agents. Like just if you like just keep writing and working on your craft and like all of these things, like you'll probably be fine. Like if
as long
like,
as you're faithful to
if you like
you know?
really like wipe up that game and like stick to it, like, you know, it'll bear fruit. Like I mean that's just what I believe. I think everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has a way that only they can tell it. Storytelling runs in like all of our blood. Like we all tell stories. We all have rhetorical devices that we've like inherited from family members. We all have legends. We all have myths. We it's, you know, like it's in all of us. Like some people maybe tap into it a little bit more, but you know, I do believe anyone could write a book.
Yeah. And you know, I'll say that I don't quite believe that if you put in the work, you'll definitely bear fruit, but you know, the world's an unfair place. But at the same time, what we can both agree on is that if you're faithful to the craft and you're doing it for the right reasons, you're giving yourself a chance.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you're not. So
yeah, and also, I mean, I think like when I was like really young, I would be like, I want to like publish a novel before this age, and I want to do this. And like Yukio Mishima published when he was 24. Like, oh shit, like I'm 25 now. Like
my bar was always Zadie Smith, which was ridiculous. I think she published White Teeth
I
at
mean,
like 21.
Like really, like that's ridiculous. So
yeah,
I mean, you know, Zadie Smith is like in the literary world, she's like the 1%, but she's like even like higher than like that. So
she's 0.01%.
Yeah, like but Toni Morrison published her first novel when she was what, like 37 or 38, and you know she's got a Nobel. Like, so when I think you're dealing with careers, like if you really plan on having a long career, it doesn't matter like if you're 26 or like 31 or like whatever. Like if your first novel is a banger and you know people are into it, like there's always going to like be a demand for you. Like, and same thing with poetry. Like Ilya Kaminsky took like almost 15 years off between books, and when he came back, like everyone was like waiting on bended knee. So
Ilya Kaminsky's deaf.
Oh yeah. Actually, the name of his book is Deaf Republic. It's not like because he's deaf. Deafness is used actually like as like a device in the book. It's like it's amazing actually. Like it's incredible, and to hear him read is a truly like religious experience.
That name does kind of like sound familiar, but I haven't really heard much about him. But
his first book is called Dancing in Odessa.
I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I have deaf parents, and a lot of my characters are deaf, and you know, obviously I write about deafness.
Yeah,
I gotta get on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Our producers are signing to me that they were published with Grey Wolf.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Very, very
yeah.
Cool.
I mean,
very cool.
he is like he's a rock star in this game.
Wow. And so when you say when he reads, does he read or does he sign and it gets translated?
He reads, but there are actually like there's like signs in the book for like certain things. Like it's really like I wouldn't be able to do it justice. But you know, I'll give you my copy. Like like it's a banger.
My producers are our producers are signing that she thinks he's hard of hearing, but we'll see. So basically, to classify that, my dad is hard of hearing.
Yeah.
Which is like, so if you take his hearing aid out, he's pretty much, deaf. But with a hearing aid in, he even spoke to me on the phone a little bit when I was younger. So.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's fascinating. I got to check him out for sure.
Ilya Kaminsky, he's amazing. Like he's like just such a cool person too.
You met him?
Yeah, and like actually, he and Kava Akbar bumped into Charisma, my like collective mate, at the Strand, and they bought her a book for her birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, like just like, you know, they're just cool people.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just real quick before we move on, just to your point, you know, it's interesting that you talk about Seth Meyers asking whether it was autobiographical, you know, which parts are true, blah, blah, blah. You know, because my novel has tons of drug use, alcoholism, organized crime, you know, the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only thing that anyone's really asked me a lot about is the deafness, like how much of that is true.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of obvious that like it's somewhat true, just because like I well, I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but like I really do think that like to write some of the stuff I wrote, you have to be familiar with the culture.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no one's ever been like, oh, so were you an alcoholic? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, and sometimes like to me that felt like a violent question in a way. So, and I don't know, like I think I'm just like very sensitive.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's understandable. So yeah, let's talk about Dear Ocean and how it got set up by human impacts and everything like that.
Yeah.
I really love this idea.
So yeah, I mean, this is like such an amazing thing to be a part of. Like, I am a resident. I'm an impacts artist resident with the Human Impacts Institute. So they give us like space to work. There's like, we have a place out on Governor's Island. Then there's the space in the Brooklyn Public Library. I have 24-hour access there. And as a part of the contract, they want us to put on.
Quick. So this was a residency fellowship.
It's a residency.
It's a residency. Yeah, and you said it was 6 months before we got on.
Yeah, so the amount of time that like we sort of like verbally agreed on was 6 months, but actually now I want to like extend it because I'm just like I'm loving it so much. It's just been such a blessing. And I've been thinking about starting a reading series for like a while, like just, you know, seeing the way that you guys did it, seeing the way like the Angry Reading series started, and just thinking like I like really want to like continue to build my community and to contribute in that way. And so I just thought it was like a great opportunity to start a reading series, and the Human Impacts Institute was like, they were totally with it. They were like, we'll let you use the space. And so they got me a date, and yeah, they're just balling out. Like they have this like whole team of interns who are like these super talented college kids they're like so with it. They're and they're helping out so much too. It's like, it's just been great. That's
awesome. So Dear Ocean is a climate change based reading series.
Yeah,
is human impacts, because that sounds broader than, you know, just climate change.
Yeah, well, so it's like work about climate change and the environment. I wanted there to be a sort of local focus, and I don't necessarily mean local to New York, like, although of course, like, you know, I invite that as well, but I'm more like local to your experience. So one of our readers, Ariel Francisco, he's going to be writing or reading poems that are based off of his experiences with climate change in Florida. So like, I really like that he's going to be coming from that experience. Someone from New Orleans would be like writing about the, you know, like what's happening there. Like someone who is from like the Pacific Islands will be like writing about like their experiences. So it's a broad issue, and I think it can somehow like sometimes feel abstract to people, but I think one thing that I hope to accomplish from this reading series is giving people that sense of immediacy and urgency, but without like necessarily trying to scare anyone or present a scenario where we're just like hopeless. And so, yeah, like all the work that we've received so far has been like so good, and everyone has like such a unique way of seeing the issue and interacting with it. So I'm just like very, very, very hyped to like see where we will go with this. Like, I was so worried that we wouldn't even have enough readers to fill the first reading slot, and then like not only that, but like we already just like we have so much good work that's been submitted.
Yeah, you were talking before we got on about
like
refreshing the email every 10
the
seconds.
first couple of days that I had the Dear Ocean email address open, I would like check it, and like every 10 minutes, and there were no emails. And then one day there's like 3 emails, and it would just like come in, and all the submissions were just like so good. And yeah, like, so I'm just like really excited to see how far we can go with this.
Yeah, no, I really admire that too, because yeah, climate change is I think one of those paradoxes where it's at the top of everyone's mind and at the bottom of everyone's mind. And I think that's one of the issues. It feels too big for any single person to solve, and yet we need every single person, to get involved.
I would love if you have any work, like the first reading is featuring mainly poets, but I don't want to exclude any other genres from submitting, even though we might be probably more poetry heavy. Mm-hmm. But if you'd send 3 to 5 poems or other short pieces of work to dear.ocean.nyc@gmail.com.
Perfect. When I sent you something the other day, I think I wrote dear.ocean.cyn or something.
Oh yeah.
And it bounced back, but yeah. So yeah, why don't we do a reading?
Okay.
How does that sound?
Yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna read something new. I think I think I have it in my head.
Ooh, wow. Straight off the dome. Let's go.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, so this is...
You did a few at Angry Reading Series.
Yeah. I like to memorize poems because that's actually how I edit. I will just walk around and just repeat it in my head. Yeah. And so it helps with the flow and stuff.
Cool.
But so this is a poem that is I think trying to write toward that place of joy. But also the work that I've been doing is connected to the sort of other stuff too. Mm-hmm. So this poem begins with the last words of the first poem of the Unbnd Verses.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and it's called They'll Ask You Where It Hurts the Most. Blessed be the bitterness at your core, that quiet light growing quieter still, like the dull moan that escapes your lips while you dream. They'll ask you, child, what you know of suffering. They'll ask you where it hurts the most, when the pain changes like the colors of the sky, and the voices of the ancestors cry out to you from the oceans, when their words vibrate in your lungs like a listless, queenless hive. You may forever, child, feel a type of way, but you must get up every morning and watch the sun rise over the ocean. Remember to love your lover. Remember the goodness and righteousness of deep red against her skin, the color of the ocean on her toenails. Remember those ancestors who praised the gods at the sight of land. One day, child, you will join them on a beach in Accra, where you'll pour out libations for those who have yet to come. Until then, stand with your arms stretched toward the sky, and though termites may eat you from within, pray to become a wise old tree, for the dignity to praise alone the sun and the rains. Pray to become a garden, to distinguish that which nourishes us from that which keeps us alive.
Yeah. Beautiful. Before I close it off real quick, I didn't say this episode's brand of fuckery is brought to you by Insomnia, so fuck you, Insomnia.
Okay, that's it for today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and review on whichever platform you're listening. You can get in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Animal Riot Press, or through our website, animalriotpress.com. This has been the 25th episode of the Animal Riot Podcast with your host, Brian Birnbaum, and featuring Kwame Opoku-Duku. Transcripts for our deaf and hard of hearing animals are provided by Jonathan Kay, and we are produced by me, Katie Rainey. See you later, you filthy animals.
It's the burn, bombing on y'all and getting gully as the fern. I don't know much about